we get divine strategies as well from heaven. And so I think that there's an opportunity, especially with so much going on in our world today, AI, human trafficking, all these really difficult challenges, to not just seek human creativity, but I feel like actually the invitation from God, from a faith perspective, is I have solutions, I have blueprints that I want to release to the world. And how do I help tune people's ears and spirit to connect with that?
Well, I can't wait for you to meet our guest today, Jess Munro. And you're going to learn so much about the concept of designing your life, staying in tune spiritually with what God is trying to tell you about how He shaped you, how He's made you, the calling on your life. And then how does that look with all the different seasons we as women navigate through with being married or single or having kids or having grandkids, having a career or staying at home. And she's going to do a wonderful job of unpacking that for all of us. So thanks for being here. Can't wait for you to listen. Welcome to the Generous Girl podcast. Today in our studio, I have a friend who lives just up the state of California from me named Jess Munro. She lives in the Bay Area, and she loves working with entrepreneurs to discover their calling and pioneer new territory through their ventures. She and her husband, Bart, lead a hospitality venture called Kingdom House, which they are building a network of properties and hosted experiences for people to taste and take home kingdom living. But she also teaches at Stanford's design school, or you might be familiar with it, called the D.school. And she and her husband have 4 children between the ages of 4 and 13. But she loves to just think about like the blend of faith and innovation and calling. And I think you're going to really be inspired to hear how the courses that she's teaching and the work that they're doing with Kingdom House is going to allow you to take the next step in your own calling and in your own, as we say, SHAPE, which is an acronym from Saddleback Church, spiritual gifts, heart, ability, personality, and experience. I just think you've put a lot of thought leadership, Jess, into this, and I'm so excited for you to be here on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you, Kim. So thrilled to be with you.
Yes, and Amy Soper and Amy is with Women Doing Well. We had the opportunity of visiting you at the Stanford Design School. I had always heard about it, but it was so fascinating to get to see it. And I know you were a student there, and it didn't quite exist when you were there. But why don't we just start by you explain the story you told us about that little NICU and the people walking for miles and what was happening with their babies that were passing away, and how D.school got involved. Because I think that is such a perfect way to summarize the work that is done through D.school.
Absolutely. Yes, it was so fun to have you and Amy over at the D.school with our crazy van and all of our energy. But yeah, design thinking, I think in a nutshell, is really kind of displayed through this story of our students working with a class called Design for Extreme Affordability. So a team of Stanford students went to rural Nepal to design a lower cost baby incubator because these low birth weight babies were being lost. And so they spent time with physicians and in the clinics, and they had a really surprising discovery. They actually discovered there were plenty of fully functioning incubators, but they were empty. So what they discovered was that the babies were being born up to 8 hours walk to the nearest clinic out in rural villages. They were never making it to the city center. Mm-hmm. So the students realized, okay, we're talking to the wrong people. We need to get out into the rural areas. We need to speak to the midwives. We need to watch babies being delivered there and discover their problems. And so what they ended up creating was what they call the Embrace Baby Warmer. So it looks a lot like a sleeping bag with a phase change material that actually keeps the baby warm for that 8-hour walk to the nearest hospital. And I love that story because it just speaks to how do you deeply understand the people you're designing for? How do you go in with curiosity? And then how do you kind of break the grids that are expected as you're coming up with new solutions?
Because you had said when we were there that they had plenty of these little NICU incubator warmers, but they just, so it wasn't a shortage and that you needed more. It was just, you were almost trying to solve the wrong problem initially. And okay, so why are these all going unused? And so what can we do to help the woman who's going to walk inevitably to get there, but she's got to have something to help her get from point A to point B to save the baby's lives. So what a beautiful way of using, people's minds and creativity to solve that kind of a problem. And I love that when we were there, we got to see an example of the little sleeping bag. Did you ever track, obviously, the numbers, and the lives saved as a result of that?
Yes. So the team actually left. They dropped out of school at Stanford of their MBA program and launched this whole organization around Embrace. And so there've been, I'd say, probably tens of thousands of babies now who have been saved as a result.
Incredible. Oh, that's incredible. Well, okay, so fun. I'm just so excited to dive into this conversation. And I think let's start with one of your threads in the tapestry in your life is what you call revelatory innovation. So how about if you unpack that for us?
Sure. So my career has started at IDEO, an innovative company creating the first mouse for Apple, always looking for the next creative thing. Has then formed into the Stanford D.school where I teach. But I feel like most recently I've been really pressing into how do we get divine strategies as well from heaven. And so I think that there's an opportunity, especially with so much going on in our world today, AI, human trafficking, all these really difficult challenges to not just seek human creativity, but I feel like actually the invitation from God, from a faith perspective, is I have solutions, I have blueprints that I want to release to the world. And how do I help tune people's ears and spirit to connect with that? So for example, one of the an advisor, Kingdom House, has an amazing story about this medical device that he received through prayer. And it was a device to remove blood clots from the brain to prevent secondary stroke from happening. And so he describes it as almost a video playing in his imagination 3 times, going into the lab the next day, building it exactly to spec, having it pass clinical trials with 100% success rate. Ended up selling it to Medtronic for 9 figures, and then had 3 new ventures that then resulted in the same way. So how do you kind of tune your spiritual intelligence to actually be able to discern ideas from heaven?
Okay, so 2 questions. How do you do that? I would love for you to break that down a little more. And then I want you to explain Kingdom House a little further as well.
Sure. So I think actually a good friend of mine, Marie-Ange Tagne, she wrote a book called For Such a Time as This. She's a Cameroonian technologist who's now become a Silicon Valley tech leader. And she says, God speaks to you in your own accent. And I just love that because I think we all have these sort of frequencies that we're used to communicating, whether it's with our loved ones, with others, and being able to tune our ears and our spirit through those frequencies, if you will. So it might be through getting a picture. It might be through nature and sort of you feel something being communicated there. It might be through even a dream or through just using imagery to kind of spark your imagination. And so I think there's some really fun ways we love to do spiritual intelligence activations actually at Kingdom House. But I think one of the things that I always encourage people to do is to think through all of your senses, to not be limited to, this only happens when I'm journaling or when I'm quiet, but it might also happen when you're moving, if you're a dancer.
Right, walking, running.
Yeah, exactly. So those are some of the ways that we love to spark that spiritual intelligence for people.
Okay, so then the Kingdom House piece, I mentioned it in your intro, but why don't you unpack further just the dream you and Bart, your husband, had to create Kingdom House, your vision for having properties across the world, and why you have Kingdom House?
Yes. Well, I can share sort of the origin story, which actually happened back in Johannesburg. So I spent 2 years helping build a Pan-African entrepreneurship academy there, and met my husband and started dating long distance during those 2 years. So as I was there about to come back to the States, I had always had a dream to co-found a kingdom business with my future husband. And so I remember I was sitting in Zoo Lake in Johannesburg and saying, all right, God, if he's the guy, if he's the future husband, how does his mission and my mission interweave? And so I got this very vivid picture in my mind that I thought was metaphoric, but I think is now becoming
happening.
It was a 2-story space. The first level was my mission. The second level was his. So the first level was this entrepreneurial innovation hub. So people were working together on hard problems. They were launching ventures together. And the second level was experiential hospitality. So spotlighting the amazing work of leaders around the world through food and story.
Uh-huh.
And that was Bart's hospitality division. So now together, those are coming together in what we're calling urban clubhouses in city centers where missional leaders can gather, can work during the day, can find co-founders, investors, and actually build projects that impact human flourishing.
Okay.
So our hope is that it's a place where you can not just get revelatory innovation and inspiration. We hope it's a place as well where you can bring all parts of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So you might come bring your spouse for a date night, or you might have family brunch with your kids on the weekend, as well as hosting a board meeting during the week, or launching around a founder's table or community dinner.
And then rub shoulders with people who are similar with their dreams and their visions. And then, like you mentioned, investors also would be a part of it to actually fund it and make it possible. So what does your husband do right now? Well, you're involved with D.school, and then you're both working on Kingdom House.
Yeah. So so his background was in technology and being a product here. So he was at eBay for many years, has really had that kind of technology story, and then had a hard right turn into building a social impact cruise line.
Okay.
That was his first kind of committed hospitality project. And so it's been fun to then see how my passion for innovation and entrepreneurship and his passion for hospitality have come together in this mission.
Yes. I mean, I don't normally ask, like, what does the husband do? But I think it fits so well in this because your vision of, okay, Lord, if this is the person for me, how do our visions align is so key to ask. And then sometimes, as we're married and focused on the kids or focused on the career, one of the partner's dreams needs to kind of be set aside for a season and then picked up a little bit later. So it's neat to see, how you've both been able to take steps in your own path as you build Kingdom House together. My husband and I kind of have a similar story where we are working on this fixer-upper overseas as a place of rest and just renewal for leaders. And we've always had this vision for our marriage as well, because we've been impacted at places and spaces that have poured into us. And so it's fun where my husband's focused on like the global nonprofit side. I'm focused more on the financial services and nonprofits in the generosity space, but we are having a good time, together trying to forge this fixer-upper that's taken a lot longer than we thought it was going to take.
I bet your character is being refined.
It is definitely being refined, yes. I look forward to the episode where I can announce it's ready and it's finished for everybody. Yes.
Post it from there.
Yeah, exactly. That would be really perfect to do that. Okay, let's jump into kind of a second thread that you mentioned to me before the episode, and that is just how you've been able to weave your faith, your family, your career, all this area together, your friendships. What would you like to share about that? Because I think especially for women, like women have the ability to multitask and just we're able to, you hear the men think like waffles and women like spaghetti, and we just have all these things going all the time. But I'd love to hear just how you've navigated with, you still have a little one, 4 years old. So any tips, things you've learned, things that you would not do again would be helpful for all of us listening.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things I've learned is don't fit into the grid that's been handed to you. So I'd say when a really difficult moment for me was actually the first year of marriage, where we got married, we got pregnant on the wedding night. And so we had a baby immediately. We had a new house, a new community. I just left IDEO and all the things that I had, found community and identity in, whether for good or bad. And I felt really lost. I felt like I really lost myself for a period of time. And so there was actually a really beautiful invitation that kind of reawakened part of me. So when my oldest son was 1 year old, I got a call from a friend of mine, a former colleague from IDEO. and saying, hey, you know, would you like to come and co-teach this class with David Kelly, who is the founder of IDEO and also the founder of the D.school. And it was this perfect invitation to kind of re-engage my design side in a container that worked well for my life. You know, going and teaching 4 days a week. I even brought Will's, our oldest son, at age 1 to our grading parties. You know, he'd crawl around as grading. And then flash forward, I'd say about 7 years from there, two girlfriends and I were getting together and saying, you know what, we want to create something that we can create amazing work in the world. We can pioneer projects, we can shape culture, and we can have a really thriving, flourishing family life with kids. And so we ended up saying, hey, I think we've got some complementary skill sets. One was a former storyteller from Duarte. So they, you know, did presentation design for places like Apple and other companies. Another was a management consultant turned executive coach, and then myself with design. And we said, okay, I think we could really build something together. And so we ended up creating something called Revelateur, which is French for revelation. Revelateur. So it's French for revelation. Yes. Okay. So a design consulting practice that really allowed us to dial up and down projects based on life stage, what was happening in the rest of our, you know, family and home life, and also create a really amazing experiences for companies like Genentech and others. So I'd say that was a huge moment to say, I want to actually intentionally design the kind of rhythms that I want to have, not just fit into someone's grid.
No, and that grid, especially with the, you know, the growth of technology, AI, what's possible now that wasn't even possible 5 years ago, always ever changing, and introducing new possibilities around the globe, especially for women that we've not had before. So I love to hear that, because I think there is no static grid. And I think sometimes if we're flexible in our mind of what it's going to look like, and it may not look like what we thought it would. For example, when we moved back to Southern California, a good friend of mine was starting a women's Bible study at Saddleback and asked me and 3 other women, the 5 of us, to be the teaching leaders for it. And I had 4 little kids, and just what it would involve would be teaching about once every 4 or 5 weeks. And that was about all I could commit to, in addition to everything else that was happening. But it was really what I needed to just feel like it still tapped into my love to influence and teach. And it was just what I needed. And, you know, 5 years earlier, it wouldn't have been enough. And 5 years later, probably wouldn't have been what I needed, but just at that time when God provided it. So I think if we are open for those opportunities, those emails, you know, sometimes I've gotten emails and I've said no to things, and then they keep coming back, and finally I'm like, okay, I'll do it. But I didn't think this was what I was going to be doing or wanted to do. And then it turns out, like, of course, God knew all along it would be the best, you know, next step and next option. But it's ever, as we know, with the ages of our kids, it's ever changing. It's always fluid. It's never static. And just when you think you've got it figured out, you give birth to a different child that's so different than the other one, or then, you know, the stages now, like you're in the teenage stages and how that looks compared to the 4-year-old stages. So I think that's part of the fun of it too with life. It's just, you never know each day what's going to come our way. But it's great to see how you've been able to, you know, keep your foot in the role of D.school while you've been building Kingdom House. And why don't you speak a little bit more to if we were students of yours or at D.school, what would that look like? Like, what are some of the classes we might take? What would we be designing? I mean, we mentioned the story at the beginning, but any other thoughts of what's been incorporated into the curriculum of D.school over the years, I think would be really interesting.
Well, about 10 years ago now, we did a project to reimagine higher ed. And what would it look like if we were actually designing higher ed from the ground up? And that was, I think, one of the 2 really valuable concepts that I think came out of that. One was this concept of open loop university. So what if you could actually, you know, why do we think that we can, no athlete would train for 4 years and then think that they are set for the rest of their life? So why do we think that's true when it comes to higher ed?
Right.
So this idea of open loop, where you could kind of loop in for a year or 2 and then loop out and go start something and loop back in, was one of the concepts that was really popular, and that, you know, it takes some time to implement. That's part of the, you know, the dream. A second one was purpose learning. declare a mission, not a major.
Mm-hmm.
For us, that has really landed strongly for students, where rather than saying, okay, I'm going to go and study this discipline and hope to get this role in the future, actually saying, okay, no, let me actually articulate the mission that I want to be on, and then how do my studies wrap around that in order to bring it to life.
So how do you help incoming students figure that out? I'm thinking for the mom who's listening, whose child might be going into college and doesn't know what major to declare. Anything you can say to that end?
Yeah. Well, so Designing Your Life is a great book that Dave Evans and Bill Burnett wrote, Stanford faculty, and they have a number of methods for how do you actually articulate this Odyssey journey and what are different life paths you could consider. Our team at d.school, and actually even back when I was at African Leadership Academy, love to articulate this mission that is really the convergence of three things. It's your gifts and superpowers, your passions and the things that drive you, and then a need in the world or a kind of impact you want to make. And these become these sort of three spheres that create this mission statement that is lifelong. And I think one of the that I really encourage both my students and our members at Kingdom House, people that I work with in general, is to not think about your mission as one venture or one job. Those are all expressions of it, but there is this overarching mission that you've been designed for in life. And how can you articulate that such that all the different roles you play over the years all converge to that.
No, that's great. You had mentioned before that we were talking in the pre-conversation about a book. I believe it's called Spiritual Integration. Do you want to?
Spiritual Intelligence.
Oh, yes. Okay, right.
So that's the fun when you were asking about, how do you kind of activate your imagination to be in tune for divine strategies. So Kris Vallotton wrote a book called Spiritual Intelligence. Have huge respect for Kris and his work and everything that he's been doing to help bridge the spiritual into the business realm. And so you'll see in there this just a number of ways to both activate your imagination and connect to the heart of God for his solutions in the world. But also, I think there's a really beautiful intersection with the renewing of the mind. So he speaks a lot actually about neural pathways and how you can create these neural pathways sort of by accident through these formative, experiences in life. And for good or bad, they create this operating system and this grid that you operate by. And if you can start to remap those, you can shift from living from a place of fear to a place of hope. And so I highly recommend.
Yes, I'm definitely going to read that. That sounds amazing. When you were talking about also the intersection of those three areas, it reminded me of the Japanese phrase do they pronounce it Ikigai? Where all things converge. And then in that middle point is where your mission is and what we exist to do. But not always easy necessarily to, kind of figure out what that is. Or maybe you've got neural pathways that aren't healthy in your brain, and you keep going down a path of things that stop you or block you from really taking that next step. So that sounds like a great book for anybody listening who wants to learn how do you receive this kind of digital download from God and clearly hear from him what it is we're called to do on this earth. But again, that's part of the mystery, part of the adventure, I think, as well. And it reminds me of a gal here in Orange County whose dad was a doctor, and he was a heart surgeon. And the day before these surgeries, he would get this blueprint of what was wrong with the patient and be able to go in and, tell the patient, like, I know what the problem is. We've got to fix your aortic valve. And, unbelievable. Like, there's no way that would have happened, except for kind of supernatural intervention. Okay. So, and then also, I know you love to kind of pull out the gold thread in somebody, and similar to what you're talking about, but any other thoughts you'd like to share with that when you're helping people design their life and step into their calling?
So I think probably before you can really design your life and step into your calling, you need to do the deep inner work. So I can, a formative moment for me that was actually quite painful, but something that I've worked through over time was actually the day I was born. My mom went down to cover a story. She was a reporter and left me in the nursery. And my 1-day-old soul took a message at that time, which is, this lie that if you don't do something spectacular, you're not worthy of holding someone's attention. And so I think that without even really knowing it, that drove me for many decades of my career to perform, to do, extraordinary things. And so the process of actually identifying where some of these lies have entered our operating system and what the truth is and how do we actually replace that lie with the truth has been a really deep process for me. I highly encourage people to press into that process of, what is it that really drives me, or why do I have this belief or this this drivenness that has been present with me, and when did I first experience that? And often there's some really beautiful work that can happen to create more true wholeness.
Right. Well, that makes me think of like the Enneagram. A 3 is an achiever. So the 2 is a helper. That happens to be my, combo of numbers. But then it's sort of like, okay, why? Like, why am I wanting to achieve? And what's underneath that? And then the helper, which is the wing. Why is that a part of me? And then, you can look from that example of the help when you're in a healthy position of a 3 and a 2, or unhealthy, and what we emphasize. But yeah, just so many components, that go into our, as you said, I love thinking of the inside of us as our own operating system. But, we have one life, right, to live. And we call this podcast The Generous Girl, because I always love to spotlight women like yourself who are living an incredible life. And, I'm sure if you were 16, you would not imagine you'd be mom of 4 kids and teaching at D.school and launching this nonprofit with your husband. But it's beautiful. And it's beautiful how God just uses our time, our talents, our treasures to live that generous life. And I know you're modeling generosity, obviously, through your nonprofit and, all the people that you're impacting that way. Is there anything else you want to add to that regard from how you would recommend, for someone listening to live a generous life? Because at seasons, we have more time to give than we have talent, or we have more treasure to give. And
yes, absolutely. Well, one other just reframe that I think was pivotal in kind of living from true self is some really great work I did with an executive coach and a dear friend called Ginny Victory. She's actually down in Southern California near you, but created kind of a visual for me of how it is that I show up and what energy I bring to any room I walk into. And so the metaphor was actually this rider in the night, Knight.
Okay.
So kind of that energy of bringing the kingdom, but was the sketch that I ended up creating was me on horseback with my kind of bow drawn and a kid in a papoose on my back. That's this sort of, someone who, again, is taking territory, creating alliances, helping, charge in to spaces where other people might run away, and kind of facing and doing hard things. And so I think that reframe for me really became an anchor as I
that's great.
All of these different roles that
yes, I like having that image. It reminds me of Galadriel in Lord of the Rings. Yes, so true. And I recently had the opportunity to hear Catherine Wolfe speak. She's the one who wrote the book Hope Heals. She lives in Buckhead, Georgia, but she was a model and experienced a stroke after her 6-month-old was born, and now has another son. So she's got an 18-year-old and a 10-year-old, but she has a phrase she's kind of coined as one word, and it's the good, hard life. So good, hard being one word. And I think that's just a beautiful way of looking at life, because, we can come in and charge and take the territory, and at times it might happen seamlessly and flawlessly, but then at other times we're hit with like what she was hit with this unexpected stroke where she almost died. And to look at the beauty she's created through this life that, she's kind of left with a face that's paralyzed and an arm that doesn't work. is so beautiful, and her inspiration of how do we navigate this good hard life, and because we all have things that come our way, but yet as women, just wanting to finish our days whenever that day comes of having lived to the full of our calling as a, if we're single or if we're married or if we're a mother, kids or no kids. But I often think also of the book, The Velveteen Rabbit, that we're just being loved, and the things are being rubbed off on us to make us our true self. And, we can fight it, or we can go with the things that and determine if we're going to allow it to make us better or bitter. And when it makes us better, I think we're really, when we're allowing it to make us better, we are growing into the true self that God has always known was there. But you have these different inputs, the things that happened to you when you were one day old that, adjusted that operating system. And then we need to reframe it and go back. And so it's like you said, doing the hard work, the self work to really be at peace with how unique each of us are. And I think that's why I really love doing this podcast, because the being able to use technology, where the woman who doesn't live in Stanford, this, Palo Alto area near Stanford, but she can hear these principles that you're talking about as we do design our life. And then wherever she is, she can take that next step and then figure out, okay, God, you and I have talked also about the Women Doing Well pathway, and that helps a woman figure out her 2-word purpose statement, and that's hard coded in her DNA, her passions, which might be anti-trafficking now, but maybe in college it was clean water. And then how does that affect a woman's plan for generosity? So the purpose, the passion, the plan for generosity. So taking all of that is just one more area that's incorporated into our overall calling as we pull that gold, out of ourselves that God has always put there. But we just can't compare each person's life, because they're so unique with the things that God's entrusted us with, what he wants us to do. But I think that's the beauty of how you live a generous life. It's kind of clearing out those areas so that the Holy Spirit can really flow through each of us and give us those divine ideas and inspiration. Also one more thing that makes me think of is I recently led this workshop, and we helped build these vision boards. We cut out magazines and everything. And when women was like, I'm not creative. And I was like, I don't like to hear that phrase, because we are all daughters of the King, and God is the creator. So we all have that in us to be creators. You might be a watercolor artist. You might be a great baker. You might be a great gardener. But I guarantee you, when you were 3 years old, 4 years old, you were not walking around saying that you were not creative, but something happened in the school system, and maybe your family or friends or neighbors, where you all of a sudden believed kind of the lie of, no, I'm not creative. Well, I would encourage anybody listening to think of yourself as creative, and think of, okay, what area do I want to, pick up and learn and try and grow. And I think there's so much joy that comes from creating, and whether it's even on Canva online, the creativity that you can create now through tech is amazing. But that's something where I just feel like that's a lie that many people have bought into our society.
Yes. Well, and to your question about generosity, I feel like when you understand your purpose, like you do with the Women Doing Well pathway, and that expression of that, and you're in that state of flow, then it is also overflow. And so It's this desire to give through your time or talent or treasure into the areas that are passions for you, and that kind of bring the dimensions of human flourishing that you uniquely were designed to.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, anything else you'd like to add before I jump to your favorite book you're reading, or Bible verse, or bargain?
I think just, an encouragement for people to take this posture and of agency, of being able to design the kind of integrated life that you want to lead. And I guess I've learned that, what you design at 25 doesn't match at 35, and to kind of just continually reevaluate, redesign, and and be really curious and adaptive for what each new season will hold.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say to the woman who is struggling right now with kind of more of a scarcity? Well, I'd love to do that, but I don't have the resources to do that. That sounds great. What would you say to?
Yeah. So one of our key design thinking principles is always to prototype or do a very small experiment, a small step. So what is that one thing that is very life-giving to you that you could do in a very micro way? So whether it's, even have a conversation about a career direction that you'd like to pursue, have a conversational interview with somebody around that. Or if it's stepping into a place of leadership where you don't feel equipped or you feel hesitant, what's that small step you could gather with a few close friends and, guide them to read a book together, to take a small action. So I think all the ability to step into something, I feel like often God will then breathe life on,
Yes.
and you'll be carried in the momentum of that.
That's beautiful. And that's really also the goal of this podcast, is for every woman listening just to take some small step. And this person's step is going to look very different than this one, but that's what we want. Just keep, like you said, conversation, getting friends together and not limiting ourselves by excuses or lack of resources or the things that can keep us stuck. But instead, okay, just what is the step God wants you to take so that He can continue to empower you, equip you, and, make it possible for you to go forward in this life He's designed for you to lead. So, well, I love this. I wish I could take your classes up there. So fun.
Well, in our open loop system, you'll be able to loop back in.
There you go. There you go. No, that's great. I mean, because think about it. You graduate from undergrad when you're 21, and then if you're quote done, that's just such a fallacy. To be able to keep that open loop is wonderful. To keep learning. Wonderful. Okay, so what is your favorite verse?
So Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And it's so funny because I have had that as my life verse from high school.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand all the dimensions of it until recently. So you can pull the thread of, not just innovation, which is, creating ideas that are countercultural, but also, kingdom revelation and wisdom. To then actual neuropathway reformation of your brain, of the way that you think, of your mindsets.
Yes.
And so I love that God has sort of revealed to me over the years just how multidimensional that verse is and how in many ways it encompasses the key threads of my story.
Yes. And funny enough, the women's Bible study, when we were the 5 women teaching it, that was the life verse for the class too, was Romans 12:2.
I love it.
Yes.
So good.
Okay, and then you mentioned the book during the podcast. Yes.
Yeah.
So we have that. And then what about a bargain?
So this is funny. So my husband pretty much does all the shopping for clothing, for the kids, for food.
He's a great husband.
But one of his favorite tricks that I've now adapted as my own is Costco Business Center lamb. So we love to entertain. We love to cook on the grill and do sort of Israel-inspired lamb dish. And that is definitely the most efficient price per pound of any kind of healthy protein that we have found.
Someone else has told me that at the Costco Business Center, and there's one down here in San Diego in San Marcos, but I've never been. So I'm glad you said that. That was on my list too. I get so many good ideas from all of you amazing guests on the show. Well, thank you, Jess. Thank you for just being here with everybody. Thank you for sharing your story and giving us a wonderful book to read and to purchase after this. And we'll look forward to hearing more about Kingdom House, and that's Kingdom and Haus is how you spell it. But just so excited to just have your generosity of sharing what God has taught you to inspire all of us and help each of us as we take the next step on our own journey. So God bless you. And thanks again for being on the show.
Can I give you a quick blessing that I heard?
Yes.
Okay, amazing. So this is one of our traditions at Kingdom House, is to have our prayer team listen for anyone that's coming to an event or joining the community as we're building our our charter membership. But this one I actually did myself. So this is kind of what I sensed in prayer for you, Kim. So you are royalty revealed. You carry the presence of God into every room, and you elevate others to see themselves as royalty that they were created to be. You carry a fragrance of eternity that draws people in. You carry a strength and a fierceness that both protects and defends people, and also fights for their best self to be revealed. You are no nonsense, and you pursue truth with grace and diplomacy, and you love people really well.
Oh my goodness. I did not know this was going to be personally for me, but thank you. Wow. Well, that's a real motivation for people that want to be a part of Kingdom House, to get individual prayer blessings. And I know when Amy and I visited you at D.School, you did the same thing. You had these people praying before we came, and you read something for Amy, you read it for me, and both so uniquely crafted for Amy, different than mine. And it's just, that's an example of like a digital download from God that he gives us. So, oh wow, I'm very, very touched. Thank you so much. So sweet, Jess. Oh, so kind. Well, God bless you. And yeah, just may the Lord make his face to shine upon you and bring you peace. And just thank you again for being on the show.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, Kim, for all that you do.
Oh, you too. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.